Good morning, Year 6. We are reading Wonder and we're on page 35 if you would like to follow along. So, first day jitters. Okay, so I admit that the first day of school I was so nervous that the butterflies in my stomach were more like pigeons flying around my insides. Mum and Dad were probably a little nervous too, but they acted all excited for me, taking pictures of me and Via before we left the house since it was Via's first day of school too. Up until a few days before, we still weren't sure I'd be going to school at all. After my tour of the school, Mum and Dad had reversed sides on whether I should go or not. Mum was now the one saying I shouldn't go, and Dad was saying I should. Dad had told me he was really proud of how I'd handled myself with Julian, and that I was turning into quite the strong man. I heard him tell Mum that he now thought she'd been right all along, but Mum, I could tell, wasn't so sure anymore. When Dad told her that he and Via wanted to walk me to school today, too, since it was on the way to the subway station, Mum seemed relieved that we would be all going together, and I guess I was too. Even though Beecher Prep is just a few blocks from our house, I've only been on that block a couple of times before. In general, I try to avoid blocks where there are lots of kids roaming around. On our block, everybody knows me, and I know everybody. I know every brick and every tree trunk and every crack in the sidewalk. I know Mrs. Grimderdale and the lady who's always sitting by a window, and the old guy who walks up and down the street whistling like a bird. I know the deli on the corner where Mum gets our bagels, and the waitresses at the coffee shop, who all call me Honey. Give me lollipops whenever they see me. I love my neighbourhood of North River Heights, which is why it was so strange to be walking down those blocks feeling like it was all new to me suddenly. Amersfoort Avenue, a street I've been down a million times, looked totally different in this for some reason, full of people I'd never seen before, waiting for buses, pulling strollers. We crossed Armsford and turned up Heights Place. Via walked next to me like she usually does. Mum and Dad were behind us. As soon as we turned the corner, we saw all the kids in front of the school. Hundreds of them talking to each other in little groups, laughing or standing with their parents who were talking with other parents. It's okay, don't worry. I kept my head way down. Everyone's just as nervous as you are, said Via in my ear. Just remember that this is everyone's first day of school, okay? Mr. Tushman was greeting students and parents in front of the school entrance. I have to admit, so far nothing bad had happened. I didn't catch anyone staring or even noticing me. Only once I did look up to see some girls looking my way and whispering with their hands cupped over their mouths, and they looked away when they saw that I'd noticed them. We reached for the front entrance. Okay, this is it, big boy, said Dad, putting his hand on top of my shoulders. Have a great first day. I love you, said Via, giving me a big kiss and a hug. You too, I said. I love you, Woogie, said Dad, hugging me. Bye. Then Mum hugged me, but I could tell she was about to cry, which would have totally embarrassed me, so I just gave her one last hug and turned and disappeared into school. Locks. I went straight to room 301 on the 3rd floor. Now I was glad I'd gone on that little tour because I knew exactly where to go and didn't have to look up once. I noticed that some kids were definitely staring at me now. I did my thing of pretending not to notice. I went inside the classroom and the teacher was writing on the chalkboard while all the kids started sitting on different desks. Harry, can you just sit still for me? Good boy, thank you. The desks were in a half circle facing the chalkboard, so I chose the desk in the middle, towards the back, which I thought would make it harder for anyone to stare at me. I still kept my head way down, just looking up enough from under my bangs to see everyone's feet. As the desk started to fill up, I did notice that no one sat next to me. A couple of times, someone was about to sit next to me, then changed his or her mind at the last minute and sat somewhere else. Hey, August! It was Charlotte giving me her little wave as she sat down at the desk in front of the class. Why anyone would ever choose to sit way up front in class, I don't know. Hey, I said, nodding hello. Then I noticed Julian was sitting a few seats away from her, talking to some other kids. I knew he'd seen me, but he didn't say hello. Suddenly, someone was sitting down next to me. It was Jack Will. Jack. What's up, he said, nodding at me. Hey, Jack, I answered, waving my hand, which I immediately wish I hadn't done, because it felt kind of uncool. Okay, kids. Okay, everybody, settle down, said the teacher, now facing us. She had written her name, Mrs. Patesso, on the chalkboard. Everybody find a seat, please. Come on, she said to a couple of the kids who had just walked in the room. There's a seat there and right there. She hadn't noticed me yet. Now, the first thing I want everyone to do is stop talking and, she noticed me, put your backpacks down and quiet down. She had only hesitated for a millionth of a second, but I could tell the moment she saw me. Like I said, I'm used to it by now. I'm going to take attendance and do the seating chart, she continued, sitting on the edge of her desk. Next to her were 3 neat rows of folders. When I call your name, come up and I'll hand you a folder with your name on it. It contains your class schedule and your combination lock, which you should not try to open until I tell you to. Your locker number is written on the class schedule, but Be forewarned that some lockers are not right outside this classroom, but down the hall, and before anyone even thinks of asking, no, you cannot switch lockers, and you can't switch locks. Then, if there's time at the end of this period, we're all going to get to know each other a little better, okay? She picked up a clipboard on her desk and started reading out the names out loud. Okay, so Julian Albans, she said, looking up. Julian raised his hand and said, here, at the same time. Hi, Julian, she said, making a note on his seating chart. She picked up the very first folder and held it out towards him. Come pick it up, she said, kind of no nonsense. He got up and took it from her. Is Amy in Chin? She handed a folder to each of the children as she read off the names. As she went down the list, I noticed that the seat next to me was the only one still empty, even though there were 2 kids sitting at one desk just a few seats away. When she called the name of one of them, a big kid named Henry Joplin, who already looked like a teenager, said, Henry, there's an empty desk right over there. Why don't you take that seat, okay? She handed him his folder and pointed to the seat next to mine. Although I didn't look at him directly, I could tell Henry did not want to move next to me. But just by the way, he was dragging his backpack on the floor as he came over. Like he was moving in slow motion. Then he plunked himself down. His backpack on really high. Then he plumped his backpack up really high on the right-hand side of the desk, so it was kind of like a wall between us. Maya, said Miss Petosa was saying. Here, said the girl with 4 desks down from me. Miles, here, and the kid that had been sitting with Henry as he had walked back to the desk. I saw him shoot Henry a poor you look. August, here, I said quietly, raising my hand a bit. Hi, August, she said, smiling very nicely as I went to get my folder. I kind of felt everyone's eyes burning into my back for a few seconds. I stood in front of the class and everybody looked down. Then I walked back to my desk. I resisted spinning the combination when I sat down, even though everyone else was doing it, because she had specifically told us not to. I was already pretty good at opening locks anyway, because I'm used to them on my bike. Henry kept trying to open his lock, but couldn't do it. He was getting frustrated and kind of cursing under his breath. Miss Petosa called out to the next few names. The last name was Jack Will. After we handed Jack his folder, she said, okay, so everyone write your combinations down somewhere safe that you won't forget it, okay? And if you do forget, which happens at least 3 points per semester, Miss Garcia has a list of all your combination numbers. Now go ahead, take your locks out of your folders and spend a couple of minutes practicing how to open them, though I know some of you went ahead and did that anyway. She was looking at Henry when she said that. And in the meantime, I'll tell you guys a little something about myself, and then you guys can tell me a little about yourselves, and we'll get to know each other. Does that sound good, yeah? She smiled at everyone, though I felt like she was smiling at me the most. It wasn't a shiny smile like Miss Garcia's smile, but a normal smile, like she meant it. She looked very different from what I thought teachers were going to look like. I guess I thought she'd look like Miss Fowl from Jimmy Neutron, an old lady with a big bun on top of her head. But in fact, she looked exactly Just sit still for me. Thank you. She looked exactly like the mum from Star Wars Episode 4, haircut kind of like a boy's and a big white shirt, kind of like a tunic. She turned around and started writing on the chalkboard. Henry still couldn't get his lock to open, and he was getting more and more frustrated every time someone else popped theirs open. He got really annoyed when I was able to open mine on the first try. The funny thing is, if he hadn't put his backpack between us, I most definitely would have offered him some help. Around the room. Miss Petosa told us a little about who she was. It was boring stuff about where she originally came from and how she wanted to teach, and she left her job on Wall Street about 6 years ago to pursue her dream and teach kids. She ended up by asking anyone if they had any questions, and Julian raised his hand. Yes, she said she had to look at the list to remember his name. Julian. That's cool, about how you're pursuing your dream, he said. Thank you. You're welcome, he smiled proudly. Okay, so why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, Julian? Actually, here's what I want everyone to do. Think of 2 things that you want other people to know about you. Actually, wait a minute. How many of you came from Beecher Lower School? And about half the kids raised their hands. Okay, so half of you already know each other, but the rest of you, I guess, are new to school, right? Okay, so everyone think of 2 things that you want other people to know about you. And if you know some of the other kids, try to think of things that they don't already know. Okay? Okay, let's start with Julian and we'll go around the room. Julian scrunched up his face and started tapping his forehead like he was thinking really hard. Okay, whenever you're ready, said Miss Petosa. Okay, so number 1 is, do me a favour and start with your names, okay? Miss Petosa interrupted. It'll help me to remember everybody. Okay. So my name is Julian, and the number 1 thing I'd like to tell everyone about myself is that I just got a Battleground Mystic for my Wii, and it's totally awesome. And number 2 thing is that we got ping pong table this summer. Very nice. I love ping pong, said Miss Petosa. Does anyone have any questions for Julian? Is Battleground a multiplayer or 1 player? The kid called Miles shouted. Not those kinds of questions, guys, said Miss Petosa. Okay, so how about you? She pointed to Charlotte, probably because her desk was closer to the front. Oh, sure. Charlotte didn't even hesitate for a second. like she knew exactly what she wanted to say. My name is Charlotte. I have 2 sisters, and we've just got a new puppy called Suki in July. We got her from an animal shelter, and she's so cute. That's great, Charlotte. Thank you. Okay, who's next? Lamb to the slaughter. Like a lamb to the slaughter, something that you say about someone who goes somewhere calmly, not knowing that something unpleasant is about to going to happen to them. I googled it last night. That's what I was thinking when Miss Petosa called my name, and suddenly it was my turn to talk. My name is August, I said, and yeah, I kind of mumbled it. What? Said someone. Can you speak up, honey? Said Miss Petosa. My name is August, I said louder, forcing myself to look up. I have a sister named Via and a dog named Daisy, and that's it. Wonderful. Have any questions for August? No one said anything. Okay, you're next, said Miss Petosa to Jack. Wait, I have a question for August, said Julian, raising his hand. Why do you have that tiny braid at the back of your hair? Is that like a pandawan thing? Yeah, I shrugged and nodded. What a pandawa thing, said Miss Petosa, smiling at me. It's from Star Wars. A pandawa is a Jedi apprentice. Ooh, interesting. So, are you into Star Wars, August? I guess, I nodded, not looking up, because what I really wanted was to slide underneath my desk. Who's your favourite character? Julian asked. I started thinking maybe he wasn't so bad. Jango Fett? What about Darth Sidious? Do you like him? Okay, guys, we can talk about Star Wars stuff at recess, said Miss Petosa cheerfully. But let's keep going. We haven't heard from you yet, she said to Jack. Now it was Jack's turn to talk, but I admit I didn't hear a word he said. Maybe no one else got the Darth Sidious thing, and maybe Julian didn't mean anything by it. But in Star Wars, Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith, Darth Sidious' face gets burnt by scythe lightning and becomes totally deformed. His skin gets all shriveled up and his whole face just kind of melts. I peeked at Julian and he was looking at me. Yeah, he knew exactly what he was saying. Choose kind. There are lots of shuffling about when the bell rang and everyone got up to leave. I checked my schedule and it said my next class was English room 321. I didn't stop to see if anyone else in my homeroom was going my way. I just zoomed out of the class, down the hall and sat down at the as far from the front as possible. The teacher, a really tall man with a yellow beard, was writing on the chalkboard. Kids came in laughing and talking in little groups, but I didn't look up. Basically the same thing as that had happened in homeroom happened again. No one sat next to me except for Jack, who was joking around with some other kids who weren't in our homeroom. I could tell Jack was the kind of kid that other kids liked. He had a lot of friends and he made people laugh. When the second bell rang, everyone got quiet and the teacher turned around and faced us. He said his name was Mr. Brown, and then he started talking about what he would be doing in this semester. As a semester is like a term, okay? Can you just stop for me, please? Thank you. At a certain point, somewhere between a wrinkle of time and a sheen of the sea, he noticed me but kept right on talking. I was mostly doodling in my notebook when he talked, but every once in a while I would sneak a look at the other students. Charlotte was in this class, so was Julian and Henry. Miles wasn't though. Mr. Brown had written on a chalkboard in big block letters, Precept, Precept. Okay, everybody, write this down at the very top of the very first page in your English notebook. As we did what he said to us, he said, okay, so who can tell me what a precept is? Does anyone know? No one raised their hands. Mr. Brown smiled, nodded, and turned around to write on the chalkboard again. Precepts, equal rules about really important things. It's like a motto, someone called out. Like a motto, said Mr. Brown, nodding as he continued writing on the board. Like a famous quote, like a line from a fortune cookie. Any saying or ground rule that can motivate you. Basically, a precept is anything that helps guide us when making decisions about really important things. He wrote all of that on a chalkboard and then turned around and faced us. So, what are really important things, he asked. A few kids raised their hands and he pointed at them, and they gave their answers, which he wrote on the chalkboard in really sloppy handwriting. Rules, schoolwork, homework. What else, he said as he wrote, not even turning around. Just call things out. He wrote everything that everyone called. Family, parents, pets, the environment, our world. Sharks, because they eat dead things in the oceans, one of the boys shouted. His name was Reed. Mr. Brown wrote down sharks. Bees, seatbelts, recycling, friends. Okay, said Mr. Brown, writing all those things down. He turned around when he'd finished writing to face us again. But no one's named the most important thing of all. But we all looked at him out of ideas. God, said one kid, and I could tell that even though Mr. Brown wrote God down, that wasn't the answer he was looking for. Without saying anything else, he wrote down who we are. Who we are, he said, underlining each word as he said it. Who we are, us, right? What kind of people we are. What kind of person are you? Isn't that the most important thing of all? Isn't that kind of question we should be asking ourselves this time? What kind of person am I? Did anyone happen to notice the plaque next to the door of the school. Did anybody read what it says? Anyone? He looked around, but no one knew the answer. It says, know thyself, he said, smiling and nodding. And learning who you are is what you're here to do. I thought we were here to learn English, Jack crackled, which made everybody laugh. Oh yeah, and that too, Mr. Brown answered, which I thought was very cool of him. He turned around and wrote a big, huge block letters that spread across the whole way of the chalkboard. Mr. Brown's September Precept. When given the choice between being right or being kind, choose kind. Okay, so everybody, he said, facing us again, I want you to start a brand new section in your notebooks and call it Mr. Brown's Precepts. He kept talking as we did what he was telling us to do. Put today's date at the top of the first page, and from now on, at the beginning of every month, I'm going to write a new Mr. Brown precept on the chalkboard, and you're going to write it down in your notebook. Then we're going to discuss that precept and what it means. And at the end of the month, you're going to write an essay about it, about what it means to you. So by the end of the year, you'll have all of your own list of precepts to take away with you. Over the summer, I ask all my students to come up with their very own personal precept, write it on a postcard and mail it to me from wherever you go as your summer vacation. People really do that, one girl said, whose name I didn't know. Oh yes, he answered. People really do that. I've had students send me new precepts years after they've graduated from this school, actually. It's pretty amazing. He paused and stroked his beard. But anyway, next summer seems like a very long way off. I know, he joked, which made us laugh. So everyone relax a bit while I take attendance. And then when we're finished with that, I'll start telling you about all the fun stuff we're going to do this year in English. He pointed to Jack when he said this, which was also funny. We laughed. As I wrote down Mr. Brown's September precept, I suddenly realised that I was really going to like school, no matter what. So the precept was, when given the choice between being right and being kind, okay, be kind. What does that mean? Yeah? Yeah, it's about choosing to be kind, isn't it? It's choosing not to say something that might upset somebody or to be rude or correct somebody. So it's about making that choice. It's kind of like the saying, if you can't say something kind, don't say anything. Yeah, things like that. Okay, it's about being kind, choosing kindness, which is a huge theme throughout the book, isn't it? Of choosing kindness. So well done. So thank you for that. We are now on page 49 and the chapter is called Lunch if you are following along. So hopefully we will get to all see you soon. Do you want to say goodbye? Bye.